Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it's understood that Scotland Yard is investigating the Hollywood actor Kevin Spacey over an alleged sexual assault in South London 9 years ago, although they wouldn't identify him by name, and he hasn't been charged with any crime. Theatre has been another industry caught up in the wave of revelations about sexual harassment, and it's prompted calls for a code of practice to prevent routine abuses of power. Our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, has this.
From the big screen, now to the stage. The spotlight focused on the theatre world, where here too it seems many victims of sexual harassment, even assault, accepted it as a grim part of the job, powerless to speak out.
And I also do not care about...
New allegations have emerged about House of Cards star Kevin Spacey during his time as artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in London.
I mean, you step on that stage, you think about the artists that have stood there.
There have been a string of claims from people who worked with him there that he groped young men and was sexually inappropriate. He was a sexual predator, said one. The Old Vic itself stands accused of turning a blind eye. In response, the theatre said it took the allegations against Kevin Spacey seriously and had launched an investigation. Today it's also reported that the Metropolitan Police are investigating Kevin Spacey after an alleged sexual assault on a young man in London in 2008. This woman has worked in theatre for years and isn't surprised by the stories coming out of sexual harassment across the industry. She has plenty of her own stories about people she has worked with over time.
And then one time in a hotel room, he just sort of lunged at me with his hands heading towards my breasts. And I jumped out of the way and he looked away and said, "Leave." So I left. But I had to carry on like 3 or 4 more venues going around with him.
It must have been frightening or unnerving at least.
It was. That moment was definitely unnerving and upsetting, particularly because I knew that I wasn't going to report it and I was going to carry on travelling with him because I wouldn't have wanted to have been thought of as a troublemaker.
Even though he lunged at you?
Yeah.
And was inappropriate?
Even though, yeah. You feel like you should just ride it out and get through it, and then hopefully next time it'll be better. But unfortunately, I think that's one of the reasons that people in positions of power get away with it, because they know that you're desperate to be there. They know that you're probably not going to say anything. There have been, up until now, no clear channels of complaint, and a real fear is that it would affect your career in the future.
Having spoken to hundreds of people in the industry, hearing allegations of everything from verbal harassment to rape, the Royal Court has now drawn up a new code of behaviour to try to make sure allegations of harassment are taken more seriously.
I think in all industries there is always gossip. There will be in Parliament, there is in journalism, there is in broadcasting, there has been in film with Harvey Weinstein. And I think a lot of the tone around that can often be some of the things that we've been hearing from people who've been saying, well, that's just the way things are. And I think we can often accept a tone around the kind of muddy areas of parties of, I don't know, whatever other things have happened.
That it's not taken seriously?
Yeah, that it's not taken seriously. Or, yeah, and people actually haven't thought before about the genuine impact. People in other positions of power haven't thought about the genuine impact on those, and I think they probably were young people's lives. And I think now this has been a thing where people have gone, what's the impact on those people's lives? How have they been made to feel vulnerable? We have to stop that and we have to listen to them.
The hope for many in the world of theatre is that things will now change and that speaking out will also mean being properly heard.
Well, let's move on from the sleaze crisis gripping Westminster now to one that has been consuming, I think it is fair to say that, the world of show business. Ever since the Harvey Weinstein scandal first broke, many famous Hollywood names have suddenly found themselves in the glare of unwanted publicity, to say the very least. The latest, of course, is the House of Cards star Kevin Spacey. Scotland Yard is now reportedly investigating claims he sexually assaulted a man in London in 2008 whilst he was director of the Old Vic Theatre.
The incident is alleged to have taken place 4 years after Kevin Spacey was announced as the new artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in South London. It's been reported that a British actor who was 23 at the time told the police he was sexually assaulted by Spacey after he'd fallen asleep at the director's home in 2008.
The Metropolitan Police have not confirmed that the claims relate to Kevin Spacey, but they have said they're investigating an alleged assault on a man in Lambeth in 2008 and that the investigation is being led by officers from the Child Abuse and Sexual Offences Command.
Growing scandals, shocking new accusations against Kevin Spacey.
There's been a week of hugely damaging headlines about the Oscar-winning actor. Anthony Rapp was the first to claim on Monday that Spacey assaulted him at a party in 1986. He was 14. On Wednesday, American filmmaker Tony Montana accused him of groping him in a Los Angeles bar in 2003. Yesterday, an employee working for the Netflix House of Cards series reportedly alleged Spacey sexually assaulted him. And on the same day, his talent agency and publicist dropped the actor following the growing allegations. And tonight there is a development in the investigation into studio boss Harvey Weinstein. New York City police have described a 2010 rape allegation against him as credible and are now said to be gathering evidence to seek an arrest warrant. The entertainment industries here and in America are daily facing shocking claims about a deeply disturbing culture off stage and behind the camera. Nina Nanar, News at 10.
Almost a quarter of an hour into this bulletin before we move off the subject of sex abuse, which I think tells you something about the times we are living through.
Now, it's getting hard to keep up with the allegations and revelations about sexual harassment that are forthcoming. Names are coming thick and fast, not just in politics. Kevin Spacey and Dustin Hoffman are two that have emerged this week, for example. But when you find out about the bad behaviour of big stars who you have admired or loved, does it affect your appreciation of their art? I consider the Woody Allen film, Annie Hall, to be one of the best movies ever. But knowing that his adopted daughter has accused him of sexual abuse, should I reassess my opinion?
You're really close.
What's the difference? It's all mental masturbation.
Oh, well, now we're finally getting to a subject you know something about.
Hey,
Just because allegations arise about the director doesn't mean the script changes or the quality of the acting. It's the same film it always was. But we have a relationship with a film that goes deeper than the lines. Some kind of aesthetic connection. It speaks to us, and what it says surely does alter with a perception of those behind the work.
It's his name.
The point is most clearly made by Bill Cosby. His character was a lovable dad, a role model. You felt he was Bill Cosby. Given the admission that the real Cosby drugged women for sex, it's hard to watch the show in the same way again. Or take Roman Polanski. Is it okay to watch movies of someone who's exiled himself to avoid court action for rape? His case raises the additional question of whether you want to give commercial reward to someone whose behaviour is appalling by buying their product. This is an omnipresent dilemma and arises in the cases of the dead as well as the living. A statue by sculptor and typographer Eric Gill sits outside the BBC's broadcasting house. After his death, it emerged he had abused his daughters. Does it now make sense to stop using the ubiquitous Gill Sans typeface? For some, Kevin Spacey's House of Cards is the most pressing application of this issue. Production has stopped on the latest series, but if they finish making it, will as many people want to watch it as in previous ones? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss all of this is the writer and Guardian columnist Lucy Mangan, and the writer and sociology professor at Birmingham City University, Kehinde Andrews, joins us from that great city. Kehinde Andrews, can I ask you first, let's just take the House of Cards example, because it's literally one I've heard people talking about. What would be your stance on that?
Well, I think in terms of this debate, we have to understand that you really can't separate out the art from the artist. In the same way that you can't separate out racist theorists from racist theory, you can't separate out the idea that you have people who potentially are sexual predators and misogynists from producing work which has created what we call rape culture. So these two things go hand in hand and they can't really be separated out. and especially in this case.
Right, and so I take it you basically do think, and it's almost like boycotting the products of people who are sexual predators or who are particularly evil sexual predators.
Well, I mean, because you can't, literally, the idea that you can separate these two things out, it's not correct, right? There is a reason why Cosby, Polanski, Spacey, it's a reason why this is men, and this is a reason why this is sexual violence. Because unfortunately, that seems to be the permissible, and that is something which is legitimated within the industry.
And so I just want to push you one more time. You wouldn't watch House of Cards at this point, then?
I mean, I actually do watch House of Cards, and I won't lie. It has changed the way I think about it.
Right.
It changes the way I see the character as well, knowing what I now know.
Right. What about you? I mean, do you have any sort of guilt about some of these, the examples we've seen in that little film, for example?
It depends whether the art's already existing, or if literally by watching it, I am putting more money into someone who's a proven predator's hands. I think there's a great difference between that and watching old Woody Allen films for pleasure. I think if you get rid of everything that's been tainted over history, and especially the clip we're going at now, you end up with very, very little. And also I worry that if you do boycott everything and if you do take it off the television and off Netflix and all the rest of it, you erase quite a part of the story. We have to learn to sit with the fact that these great things, and less great things, were often created by terrible people. We have to sit with that and learn that they correlate, and you know, great talent doesn't mean a great person. And
it actually almost gets you to the Rhodes Must Fall debate about the statue of Cecil Rhodes, you know, and almost the same. But Gehinder, where do you draw the line? Because it is interesting, isn't it, that sex and sexual aggression does seem to be taken as more serious than other violent crimes. You could imagine somebody involved in a violent crime or coming out of jail for some offence that is not sexual by nature, and I don't think you would take the same view of not wanting to watch their product as you would about a known sexual predator.
Well, I think there's a distinction here, because I think one of the things is if you've done a crime and you've given, you know, you served time for that crime, then there's a question there about, well, do you, you know, have you recuperated? And I think in the issues that we're talking about, these are things which have gone unpunished, right? Of people who, if what is being said is true, should have been punished and have not been punished, and have been given a license to carry on doing the things that they've done. And I think that's why it's really important that it's not a coincidence that these are of a sexual nature. It's not a coincidence that these are men, and it does tie into some of the problems with the culture of the product that we're talking about.
I mean, Lucy, it's quite clear, isn't it? There are things that we're going to take out. No one is going to see archive of Top of the Pops with Jimmy Savile, basically. That's just removed from the public space, isn't it? So clearly there is a sort of line, isn't there? And I imagine you agree with not showing archive of...
It is. I think we all make our moral choices on a continuum, and as a recipient or a watcher or a viewer of whatever it is, we all make that decision. Obviously, I would certainly easily choose not to watch Jim or Fix It repeats were they still on show, because of, you know, the weight of that art compared to the weight of what he did is, you know, there's no contest. But there's a whole other grey area where we make on an individual basis a sort of trade-off. But it becomes very difficult if people are making those trade-offs or deciding those things on our behalf. And that's where I worry that we get into just pushing a whole lot of difficult stuff aside.
So Eric Gill, the case of Eric Gill, I mentioned him there, that he's obviously been dead for decades now. Pretty hideous stuff he did in his life without anyone realising it till afterwards. Mm-hmm. For you, we just have to accept he was a flawed person, but nevertheless enjoy his typeface and his work.
That's a really difficult one. I had the similar problem. I was writing a book about children's literature, and there's an author there who was an active paedophile throughout his life while he was writing, and was convicted for it. And I had to decide whether to put him in the book or keep him out. And in the end, I made an irrational but emotional bit, because I can't read his stuff anymore without these images crowding into my head, and that's but it's not logical, and it's not, and I feel bad about not having put him in the history of it when he was a very well thought of writer. I don't think that's purely right, but I did on the whole think I thought the morality of the decision outweighed the the sort of academic.
No, I understand what
but
you're saying, but
you have to make that.
There's an aesthetic connection.
We
to the
all
product,
make
it
those.
tarnishes it. But sorry, Kahinda, do you want to come in on that very point?
I was going to say part of the problem is that we need to start decentering the people who do this, right? I mean, and by saying that this is great art and we have to keep it in its historical place, well, actually, by doing that, we're ignoring the other art that goes on. We're ignoring the women, minorities who produce art which we haven't said is this wonderful piece, right? And I think that's really important. Sometimes it's about shifting away from the dominant narratives and away from some of the things we think is good,
but you
and
don't,
opening up the debate.
You don't worry, Kahinda, just very briefly, you don't worry that you'll end up throwing away too much stuff. I mean, we'll lose half the historic art that's out there.
And if we end up losing a bit too much so that we can have a much more diverse and a much more open and more people come in, then that's just the risk we have to take.
Okay.
But this
Kahinda,
really...
Kahinda, we need to leave it there, I'm afraid. Yeah. Kahinda, Lucy, thanks both very much indeed.